After 41 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife completely, until one night she sat me down and shattered everything I believed about our life together. What she said next changed my world forever, and led me down a path I never imagined. When I woke up that morning, everything seemed perfectly normal, except for one small thing. My wife Lisa wasn't lying beside me in bed. That was unusual. I typically wake up earlier since my workday starts at 8 a.m., whereas Lisa doesn't have to be in until 9:30. I went through my usual morning routine, then headed downstairs to start brewing coffee for the both of us. But as I stepped into the kitchen, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee was already filling the air. There she was, Lisa, sitting at the small breakfast table, fully dressed for work, sipping from her cup. She greeted me with a warm smile and we exchanged our usual good mornings. As I reached for my own coffee, she glanced up and casually said, "I have to head in early today for a meeting. I'll be off by 5 o'clock and will come straight home. We need to talk when you get back." That caught me off guard. Raising an eyebrow, I asked, "Oh? Did I forget something? What do we need to talk about?" Lisa simply waved her hand dismissively. "Nothing urgent. We'll talk later," she said lightly, then got up, placed her cup in the sink, gave me a quick kiss goodbye, and was out the door before I could even press for more details. Before I get too deep into this story, let me tell you a little about us. My name is Tom Carter and my wife Lisa, and I have been married for over 41 years. That's right, we tied the knot right out of high school at just 18. We've known each other since the second grade, dated all through high school, and always knew we were meant to spend our lives together. Neither of us ever had another serious relationship, and we learned everything about love and intimacy together. In fact, I've never even kissed another woman, aside from the occasional polite peck on the cheek in greeting. And as far as I know, Lisa has been just as devoted. We went to college together as newlyweds, scraping by in a cheap apartment while juggling part-time jobs to make ends meet. I had the GI Bill to help cover school costs, and Lisa's parents pitched in for her tuition, so while money was tight, we made it work. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't unbearable either. In fact, we started our family while we were still in school. Our eldest daughter, Erin, is 37, married, and has 2 children. She works as a family law attorney for a firm out of state. Our second daughter, Rachel, is 35, single, and works in Washington, D.C., as an assistant to a director in the Department of Agriculture. And our youngest, Megan, is 34 and married to a local police officer in our hometown. She's a dedicated stay-at-home mom raising our other 2 grandchildren. We couldn't be prouder of our girls. I landed a job as a risk analyst for a major insurance corporation, while Lisa became an elementary school teacher for the local district. Eventually, she transitioned into a part-time administrative role. Now, at 59, we're both in excellent health and great physical shape. We've always been an active couple. I spend my time golfing, swimming, and hitting the gym at least 3 times a week. But if I think I'm disciplined, Lisa puts me to shame. She's at the gym 5 days a week and is a dedicated distance runner, logging miles almost every single day. I might be a little biased, but to me she's still the most stunning woman I've ever laid eyes on. Even after 41 years and 3 kids, she hasn't gained a pound since our wedding day. When we were younger, her beauty was so striking that she could walk into a room and turn heads. Not just from men, but even other women would stop to admire her. And to this day, she still catches the attention of men half her age. But no matter what, she carries herself with grace and dignity, something we often laugh about together. Lisa and I have always talked about how fortunate we are. Our life together has been the picture-perfect American dream. We found each other early, built a wonderful family, and still wake up every morning feeling grateful for the life we share. So, when I heard the words, "We need to talk," I didn't feel that usual sense of dread most men might. There was no cold sweat, no panic. I was curious, sure, but not worried. We've always had open conversations, what we like to call family meetings. Even before we had kids, we made it a habit to sit down and plan out our future, making sure we were always on the same page. But now that I thought about it, Lisa hadn't called it a family meeting, had she? That small detail stuck with me throughout the day. Still, I wasn't preoccupied with stress. In fact, my thoughts drifted now and then to the incredible night we'd shared just hours before. Lisa has always been confident and expressive when it comes to intimacy, never shy about saying what she wants and making sure we both enjoy ourselves. One thing she's always insisted on is honesty. No pretense, no pretending, because as we agreed long ago, true intimacy only works when both people are open about their needs. Lisa isn't the type to experience small, fleeting moments of pleasure. When she reaches that point, it's intense. Her whole body shudders, her eyes roll back, and sometimes she even loses herself for a few seconds. It's incredible to witness and be a part of. She always jokes that she'd never cheat on me because, after 41 years together, training someone new would just be too much work. Even now, after all these years, we still have an active love life, sharing those moments 2 or 3 times a week. Last night was no different, and Lisa even told me, as she often does, that while my body may not work quite like it did when I was 25, my hands, lips, and tongue have only gotten better with time. As the day went on, my curiosity about what Lisa wanted to talk about only grew. I left work a little early that day, eager to get home before Lisa so I could change into something comfortable, pour myself a glass of my favorite single malt scotch, and finally find out what this mysterious conversation was about. But as I pulled into the garage, my curiosity started shifting into concern. Lisa's car, a 7-year-old Camry, was already parked inside. That wasn't what I expected. My unease grew even stronger when I stepped inside and found her sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in her hand, and my scotch already poured and waiting for me at my usual seat. She looked distressed. Her free hand was rubbing her knee over and over, an old nervous habit of hers that I had seen for as long as I had known her. Something was definitely wrong. "Mind if I go change real quick before we start?" I asked. She shook her head. "No," she said, her voice unsteady. "I need to do this right now. Please just sit." That response caught me off guard. I didn't argue. As I lowered myself into the chair, my mind started racing. The only thing I could think was that she was about to tell me she was sick. My chest tightened and my breathing grew unsteady. I looked into her eyes, searching for an answer before she even spoke. But what I saw there, I had never seen before. It was something between fear and determination, something I couldn't quite place. And that alone sent a chill through me. Her voice was low and deliberate, wavering slightly. "Tom, there's something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I need to get this out without interruption. Please, just let me finish before you say anything." I gave a small nod, my mind still spinning. This can't be happening, I thought. Lisa took a deep breath and continued. "I've been thinking about this for months. And there's something I have to do before I'm too old." The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. My vision blurred at the edges. My chest felt heavy, as if someone had placed a cinder block on it. Then she said the words that would change everything. "I'm going to date other men." The air was sucked from my lungs. "I need to see what I've been missing all these years." I could barely process what I was hearing. "It won't last forever. Maybe 6 months. And then I'll come back. I'll be your loving wife again, and I'll spend every day proving how much I love you." I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My body felt disconnected from my mind. Everything blurred together, spinning faster and faster until darkness. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed. The lights above me were dim, the faint beeping of a heart monitor the only sound in the room. My chest ached, but not from what Lisa had said. I turned my head slightly, seeing the worried face of a nurse hovering nearby. "You had a heart attack," she said gently. "A very serious one. It's called a widowmaker. You're incredibly lucky to be alive." Lucky? I didn't feel lucky. It was 3 a.m., and I was lying in a hospital bed, waiting for the doctor to come in later that morning to explain the extent of my condition. But no explanation could make sense of what had just happened to my life. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat was raw, dry, and aching. "Don't try to talk, Mr. Carter," the nurse said gently. "You had a ventilator in your throat. It'll take a couple of days to heal." As my mind cleared, I reached for a pen and motioned for something to write on. A small part of me figured that, with the way my luck had been going, I'd probably survive this only to end up in a vegetative state. Might as well go out on my own terms, I thought bitterly. And if nothing else, maybe my choice would send a shockwave through Lisa. Let her feel even a fraction of what she had just put me through. But I didn't sleep. I had already been unconscious for days. All I could do was lie there, think, and make plans. Officially, I worked as a risk analyst for an insurance corporation. But in reality, my job was to help our clients assess and mitigate risk within their own organizations. It required careful analysis, pattern recognition, and the ability to anticipate threats before they became disasters. Ironically, it seemed I had failed spectacularly at doing that in my own life. Lisa had always been a direct, matter-of-fact person. She never sugar-coated things, not to be cruel, but simply because that was the way her mind worked. She didn't set out to shock me, she had just stated her decision plainly, as if she were discussing weekend plans. But now, with nothing but time on my hands, I replayed every moment in my head. She said she had been thinking about this for months. Were there signs I missed? Subtle changes in her behavior? Hints she had been dropping that I was too blind to catch? The answer, no matter how hard I searched, was no. Lisa wasn't impulsive. She wasn't the type to act on a whim. She was deliberate in everything she did. Which meant that, whatever this was, it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crisis. It was a decision she had been carefully weighing, planning, and just waiting for the right moment to execute. I barely noticed when the doctor came in. He introduced himself and explained what had happened. "You had what's known as a widowmaker heart attack," he said. "It's caused by a complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery." His tone was professional, but there was something else there. Disbelief, maybe. "You're very lucky," he continued. "This type of heart attack has a very low survival rate. If your wife hadn't been there to call 911 immediately, you wouldn't have made it." That was the second time someone had told me how lucky I was. But I still didn't feel lucky. I swallowed, my throat aching as I forced out a raspy question. "Can stress cause this?" The doctor hesitated before nodding. "Yes, severe emotional trauma can absolutely be a trigger." I closed my eyes, letting that sink in. Severe emotional trauma. Yeah, that sounded about right. A few minutes later, another doctor entered the room, introducing herself as the hospitalist. She started going over the list of medications I'd need, treatment options, and what my recovery would look like. But I barely heard a word she said. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about my health. I was thinking about Lisa. And what the hell I was going to do next. The list of medications and treatments I would need for the next year was overwhelming. It felt like I'd become a walking pharmacy. And as I stared at the seemingly endless regimen, I couldn't help but think that option 4, the one where I just let go, was starting to look more appealing by the minute. Not long after the hospitalist left, I heard a commotion outside my room. It was Lisa. I couldn't see her, but I could hear her raising her voice at the nurses, demanding to see me. Apparently, hospital staff had denied her access, and she wasn't taking it well. I listened as they firmly explained that she wasn't allowed in my room right now. She didn't argue for long. Instead, she shifted tactics. "Then at least tell me how he's doing," she pleaded. Her desperation was obvious, but I wasn't ready to deal with her. Not yet. Eventually, they had to call hospital security to calm the situation. A few minutes later, Beth, one of my nurses, came in. "She's been escorted out," she said gently. Then, after a pause, she added, "She's been told about your condition." She blamed herself. That didn't surprise me. The question was, how much of this does she actually regret? The heart attack? Or just the fact that I survived? Beth reassured me that she had also asked my daughters to leave for the time being, giving me some much-needed space to recover. "I know you'll have to talk to your wife eventually," she added, "but maybe for now you'd feel up to speaking with your daughters?" That I agreed to. That evening I saw each of my girls one by one. But I made one thing clear: I didn't want to talk about their mother. Not now. Instead, I told them how happy I was to see them, how much I loved them. My voice broke as the weight of everything settled in. I had come terrifyingly close to never seeing them again. Tears welled in my eyes, and for the first time since waking up, the gravity of what had happened truly hit me. Sydney, my youngest, couldn't help but slip in one detail. "Mom told us she blames herself for everything that happened," she admitted. She didn't elaborate and I didn't ask. A few days later, my daughters and Lisa made a decision about where I'd stay after my release. I would return home, but Lisa would move in with Sydney's family, staying in their guest room. Meanwhile, Terry and Darcy would take turns helping me with anything I needed for the first few weeks. The doctors were optimistic, saying I should be back to normal activity within 5 or 6 weeks. I had no objections to the arrangement, but one thing struck me as odd. In the first 2 weeks I was home, Lisa never once tried to reach out to me. Not a single call. Not a single message. And for the life of me, I couldn't tell if that made things better or worse. I tried to inject a little humor to lighten the mood, though I was barely convincing myself. "Oh, Dad, she loves you so much," Darcy said, her voice gentle but firm. "This doesn't change anything. She just wants to experience some things before she gets too old. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you." I stared at her in disbelief. "Do you really believe that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. "I mean, honestly, Darcy. How can her sleeping with other men not mean anything to me?" I shook my head, feeling my frustration rise. "I can't believe you just said that." Darcy sighed, looking at me with the kind of patience you offer a child who doesn't understand something simple. "It's not about you, Dad. It's something she needs to do for herself." I couldn't take it. "So what, you think I should just accept it? Act like it's normal? Like it doesn't tear me apart?" We went back and forth for another 10 minutes, but we weren't getting anywhere. Darcy's stance was clear. She didn't see this the same way I did. I could feel my temper rising, and I knew I had to shut this conversation down before I said something I'd regret. Then, in a voice softer than before, she asked, almost childlike, "What are you going to do, Dad?" I exhaled heavily, running a hand over my face. "I don't know, Darcy. I just don't know." I hesitated for a moment before adding, "But I do know one thing. There's no way I can stay married to your mother while she's out sleeping with other men. That's just not who I am." I knew full well that Lisa would hear the details of this conversation soon enough. That's just how our family worked. News traveled fast, especially something like this. But I didn't care. I was past the point of worrying about what she might think. As the reality of it all sank in, I braced myself, half expecting another heart attack or at least a stroke. But neither came. All I felt was an overwhelming sadness. Because at that moment I knew, really knew, my marriage was over. And the strange thing was, I wasn't even surprised. Lisa had always been headstrong, always made up her mind and stuck to her decisions. But one question kept gnawing at me: why did she even call 911 when I collapsed? It didn't make sense. Unless, in her own strange way, she did still care about me. Maybe not in the way a wife should, but in some twisted, complicated fashion. I shook my head. None of it mattered now. Later, Sydney came to see me. I needed answers. I looked at her carefully. "Sydney," I asked, "how often?" Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Through choked sobs, she whispered, "Almost every night, Dad." I closed my eyes. Sydney wiped her face and continued, her voice raw with emotion. "I tried talking to her about it. I told her she was cheating on you. But she just kept saying she wasn't, that she wasn't actually sleeping with any of them. And besides, she told you what she was going to do, so she thinks it doesn't count." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Before Sydney left, I picked up the phone and called Lisa. My voice was calm, controlled. "I'm feeling better," I told her. "You can come over." I didn't know exactly why I said it. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I just wanted to look her in the eye one last time. But deep down I already knew the answer. And nothing she said would change it. Lisa had always been particularly knowledgeable about American history, especially the Civil War. And it was clear to me now, she had taken a page straight out of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's strategy at Little Round Top during the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Chamberlain's 20th Maine had been placed at the extreme left flank of the Union Army, backed into a desperate position with nowhere to retreat. When the Confederates charged, instead of folding, he ordered a daring bayonet counterattack, turning the tide of the battle when surrender had seemed inevitable. And just like that, Lisa had positioned herself. She had made her move, declared her intent, and now she was pushing forward as if she had already won. She stood in our bedroom, gathering her things, her posture confident, unwavering. "I'll be back tomorrow with the rest of my stuff from Sydney's house," she said casually. "Then we can move forward and get on with our lives." As she turned to leave, I spoke, my voice quieter than I intended. "Lisa, thank you for calling the paramedics." She stopped just for a second, then let out an exasperated sigh. "It's because I love you, dummy," she said with an annoyed shake of her head. "We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. Now get some rest, we have a lot of time to make up for." And with that she walked out. But before she disappeared down the hallway, I forced out one last sentence. "Lisa, there's one more thing." She didn't stop. That night I lay in bed waiting. I had never been able to sleep when she was out. It wasn't about worrying where she was or what she was doing, I already knew. I was just waiting for the inevitable. The sound of the garage door opening signaled her return. Her heels clicked across the tile floor in the kitchen, then the stairs groaned under her weight. When she stepped into the bedroom, we locked eyes. And in that moment, without a word spoken, we both knew. She knew that I knew. The moment stretched between us before she broke eye contact and headed straight for the master bathroom. As she moved, she mumbled under her breath, "This doesn't mean anything at all." I said nothing. Because at this point I knew better. As the days passed, I found that I was no longer consumed by grief or confusion. My mind felt clearer. My resolve had hardened. I didn't waste time wringing my hands wondering what if? Or where did I go wrong? I didn't punish myself for failing to read between the lines or for not anticipating every unspoken emotion Lisa might have felt. Because in my mind, marriage was a covenant, an agreement between two people who vowed to respect, love, and remain faithful to one another. And she was the one who broke that contract. Not me. She had never brought up any problems in our marriage. Never sat me down to tell me she was unhappy. Never once gave me a chance to fix what was supposedly broken. Instead, she made her decision. She did this to us. Not for us. And as I lay there in the quiet of our bedroom, I realized something. I wasn't going to fight for someone who had already left. Lisa had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I was ready for her. One night after Lisa had gone out, I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had held countless family meetings over the years, and waited for her to return. When she finally walked through the door, I spoke calmly. "Lisa, we need to talk." She barely glanced at me. "Not now," she said dismissively. "I need to take a shower and get some sleep. We can talk in the morning." "No," I said, my voice firm. "We're doing this now." Something in my tone made her stop. She turned to look at me, finally giving me her full attention. "I want this conversation to be private for your sake," I continued. "I don't want to embarrass you in public, but honestly, I wouldn't mind having this discussion in front of the very people you've been sleeping with." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Don't worry, Lisa," I said. "I haven't followed you. I don't have photos, audio, or video proof of your affairs. None of that matters to me." I exhaled slowly before continuing. "It's simple. We live in a no-fault state. Everything gets split down the middle. Our kids are grown and on their own. The house is paid off. We settle our joint credit card debt and we move on." She crossed her arms. "Are you finished?" "Yes," I said. "That was the last real conversation we had. From that point on, everything was handled through lawyers. Lisa, of course, refused to sign the divorce papers. I expected as much. So I had her formally served at work. That got her attention. She hired her own attorney and did everything she could to stall the process. No amount of reasoning from me or pleading from our daughters made any impact. But in the end, there was nothing she could do to stop it. 6 months later, we were sitting in family court, our lawyers by our sides, ready to finalize the divorce. Honestly, I wasn't even paying attention to most of the proceedings. I had already made peace with the outcome. But then Lisa stood up and addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I want to say something before this is finalized." The judge nodded for her to continue. Lisa took a deep breath. "I realize now that what I did was wrong," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I stopped seeing anyone as soon as he served me with divorce papers. In fact, I've been seeing a therapist several times a week, and she's helped me understand how much I've hurt my husband." I remained silent, my jaw tight. Lisa turned to the judge. "I know I can't stop him if he insists on going through with the divorce," she said, "but I was hoping the court could order us to go to couples counseling. We've been together for over 50 years. Doesn't that mean something? Shouldn't we at least try to fix this?" For a moment there was silence. Then the judge, looking genuinely moved, smiled warmly. "I think that's a wise request," he said. The courtroom seemed to shift. People were watching as if they were witnessing a heartfelt moment from a Hallmark movie. I turned to my attorney. "What happens if I withdraw my divorce petition right now?" I asked quietly. My lawyer, Clarence, a no-nonsense man who had guided me through this mess with unwavering professionalism, adjusted his tie and replied simply, "The court would no longer have jurisdiction over the case. No one could order you into counseling." That was all I needed to hear. The judge, still smiling, looked at me expectantly. "Well, Mr. Carter? Would you be open to counseling?" I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked Lisa in the eyes. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I would not." The judge's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded. With a swift bang of the gavel, he granted my request. Lisa's face crumpled. Her attorney looked just as devastated. Tears welled in her eyes. But I didn't stay to watch. As the people not involved in our case got up to head toward the cafeteria, I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I was furious, but I didn't show it. Instead, I forced what I hoped was a neutral, maybe even happy, expression onto my face and walked straight out of that courtroom. I didn't look back. I reached my car in long, determined strides, but Lisa was right behind me, talking a mile a minute. "Tom, we can still be happy. Blah blah blah." I wasn't listening. I got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Lisa standing there, stunned and speechless. I didn't go home. Not yet. I had parked my motorhome just a few blocks away, fully packed and ready to go. It was waiting for me just like I had planned. But first, there was one last conversation I needed to have. I drove back to the house. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw all 3 of my daughter's cars parked outside. Just as I had expected. I had given them a heads up earlier, knowing there would be trouble and wanting them there to keep things from escalating. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the front door. I heard Lisa's footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open and there she was. Tom? Thank God, she exclaimed, relief washing over her face. We were so worried about you. Behind her, the girls were already staring at the motorhome parked outside, their sharp minds piecing things together before I even said a word. I offered a small smile. Sweetheart, I actually stopped by to say goodbye. Lisa's expression shifted in an instant. What do you mean goodbye? I stepped inside, feeling a sense of calm settle over me. The last couple of weeks had given me plenty of time to think. About everything. My life. My choices. My future. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't uncertain. I was at peace. So I started speaking. First off, I want to apologize, I said, looking Lisa in the eyes before glancing at our daughters. To all of you. Lisa blinked in confusion. Apologize? Yes, I said firmly. I regret the way I reacted when you first told me about your decision. I let the weight of the words hang in the air before continuing. I know I acted out in the hospital. I let my emotions get the better of me. Lisa opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Please, let me finish. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. I took another deep breath. We've spent 50 years together, Lisa, and I will always cherish the memories we made. But the truth is, we are no longer the same people we once were. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. Lisa's face twisted with emotion. Tom, I don't want to be alone. For the first time in weeks, I really looked at her. And I saw something new. She was scared. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Lisa's voice trembled, thick with emotion. I'm never going to give you a divorce, she said, her breath hitching between sobs. We will be together for the rest of our lives. I messed up so badly. I never should have said those things to you. I watched her, unsure how she was even managing to speak through the flood of tears and gasping breaths. She looked like she was on the verge of hyperventilating. The girls, though teary-eyed, remained remarkably calm. I took a steady breath. Lisa, I accept that. That was all I could say. My throat felt tight, my emotions threatening to break through. Unable to speak further, I turned to my daughters. Ladies, I said gently, I'm sorry it has to be this way. I will always love you. Please, take care of your mother for me. Their faces crumpled, tears spilling freely now. If you need to reach me, you can email me, I continued. I won't have a phone or a permanent address. I don't plan on staying in one place for very long. By now, all three of them were crying. Lisa too. I stood up, walked to the door, and without another word, stepped outside. I climbed into the motorhome, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. And just like that, I headed off into my new life, alone.